but it's the tube. And after flying, it reminded me how much I don't want to be on the tube.
Yeah, no, it's definitely horrible. Okay, guys, I'm going to start making this live now, so we'll start seeing people come through. So that's just opened up. So, oh, sorry, I always get an echo in my, there we go. So welcome to everyone that's starting to join us, very prompt this morning. It's great. As I said when I first started doing these, actually with the real life events, it takes people always show up like 5 minutes late and sneak in the back, but with webinars, everyone's always bang on time, which is beautiful. So yes, we have got a lot of people joining us today, which is great to see you come in. You'll see myself, Gary and Mary on your screen. Oh, I'm just having some technical issues. If you hear that, that's okay. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes for other people to join. I know some of you are joining straight in through YouTube, which is fine. As you guys do start joining, if you can just introduce yourself, say where you're from, that would be great, and we'll get the chat going, because it'd be useful to have some of your input throughout this, and any questions that you've got to ask, that'd be lovely. Just in terms of the, good morning, guys. Hi, Nishri. Just in terms of working with Zoom, I know everyone is very familiar with this now. However, you may just want to go down the bottom, open up your chat section. Change the settings would be set at just communicating with all panelists. So if you change that to all panelists and attendees, that would be great. And then everyone can see the comments that you're putting in, so that we're not having two different conversations in different places. That would be wonderful. So yeah, so that once that's all set, we've gone through all those technical things this morning. If you're watching on YouTube, you won't be able to participate in the chat, but I will send it around via email afterwards, because there have been loads of really useful suggestions on previous conversations and webinars, so we'll send that round. For those of you that are just joining us, just introduce yourself, say hello, make sure you're addressing both us and the attendees by changing your settings, and we'll launch into it. I know there are a few people joining us a little bit late, so yes, welcome everyone. So we are joined this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by Mary O'Hagan, Interim Director of Fundraising from MENCAP, who you will see on your screen, and also Gary Kernahan, who is joining us from Children First. They have both come highly recommended. I've worked with Mary a little bit before. Gary's new to me, but highly recommended by his team, so we had to get him involved. Gary's Director of Fundraising and Business Development at Children First, who are a Scottish-based charity. I thought it was really important to have someone based in an outside of London charity. I know that's feedback that people have given that have attended previously, and organisations of different sizes as well, so that you can kind of see the variety of experience across the sector. Both of these lovely leaders have seen stable income across the COVID period, and I wanted to ask them to join me today to share what's led to the success, what they've learned through this process. I've not called it mistakes, but what they've learned, as well as top tips moving forward, because obviously we're not out of the woods yet. So hopefully you'll have some really clear, kind of tangible points of what's led them to be successful during this time period. I know I've seen from some of you popping on that you've also had your own successes across the organisation, so it'd be great for you to kind of share those throughout. To start with Mary, so for those of you who aren't familiar with her, she has developed a reputation in the sector for leading from the front and her dedicated work ethic. She oversaw some really great successes at Action for Children, and again since joining MENCAP. While she's been there, she's overseen restructures, revitalisation of working practice, and also strengthened the voice of fundraising within the organisation, because I guess we all know MENCAP's a very old organisation and probably quite traditional in their ways of working. And Gary, as I mentioned, comes highly recommended by members of his team. Initially, he was consulting with Children First and then became permanent in January, which was wonderful timing, Gary. I'm sure that was a delight just before the biggest challenge we've ever faced. But he's still very positive, and he's going to talk us through all the great successes that his team have put together. And I think one of his team is on here with us today, so that will be lovely. Just in terms of me, I'm sure most of you have kind of heard this spiel before, but we obviously are a recruitment agency. This is a free webinar as part of our series as a way of supporting the sector during COVID-19. Obviously, there's lots of changes and challenges still coming, but we'll continue to support through this and also through blog content to try and help you manage your organisations and teams through this time. Obviously, alongside this, we recruit for roles. I know a lot of people are relaunching recruitment, so anything that you need in regard to that, or advice on structures or salaries or things, please do get in touch. We're always happy to have a chat. Gary or Mary, did I miss anything off, or do you guys want to say anything extra?
No, just hi everybody. Thank you very much for joining. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to MenCap whenever we start the slides.
Perfect. Okay, lovely. And yes, Gary will go through that as well. So I'm just starting to share the screen now. And we'll go into this. So obviously we've just talked through, so we're going to be discussing leading teams to deliver stable income through COVID-19, and then tips for that moving forward as well. So the structure of today's session will be as followed. We're going to discuss MenCap's performance during COVID, Children's First performance during COVID, key success factors, lessons learned, and useful tips for the future. So Mary, let's start with you in the hot seat. I'll try not to grill you as you go through this, don't worry. Sure. Talk us through then MenCap's performance during lockdown.
So just for people's background, MenCap supports 1.5 million people living with a learning disability across the UK. Some people get us confused with mental health charities, so just want to be clear on our purpose. And we are a £200 million organisation. That's our total income, but our fundraised income is about 13 million of that. So the remainder of our income comes from commercial activities and also local authority funding. So relatively speaking, our fundraising is quite small in comparison to the rest of the organisation. But during a global pandemic, that has actually provided us with stability in the organisation because our local authority funding has continued. So that has been really great. At the first week of lockdown, like everybody, I think we all sat down and started to think about every possible scenario that could happen. And I was starting to think that we could have up to a 20% reduction in our income this year. We are bucking the trend on that at the moment, which is amazing. We're currently delivering our budget, and in some ways I feel a little bit like it could be the calm before the storm, but and so we aren't forecasting down at Q1 reforecast, but there are certain areas of income that I do anticipate will reduce over the coming year, and particularly into next year. So I'll just talk you through a little bit about each income stream if that is helpful. As some of you will know, we were the marathon partner this year, and we still are the marathon partner, and their intention is that the marathon will go ahead if at all possible in any format that is possible. So we still hold out all hope for that, but it's obviously had an impact on our income as runners, as I'm sure all of you will know. For anyone who has signed up to the London Marathon, runners are a little bit uncertain at the moment, so it's hard getting them to do their training, and it's hard to encourage them to do their fundraising to the same level. That was going to be significant income for us this year, so that has had an impact of hundreds of thousands of pounds on our event portfolio. But actually we've made up for that in other areas, and hopefully if it goes ahead, that will continue to perform then whenever people know the marathon's happening. Okay, get back to fundraising. And the people who had signed up to run for us are hugely committed to the organisation and to running for us. So we are really hopeful that if that happens, that we will be able to achieve the target we'd set out at the beginning.
Sorry, Mary, just out of interest on that, in terms of stewarding those runners, how are you keeping them engaged?
So we are very personable. So the events team in MenCap are amazing, and our members of staff phone people regularly. So keep in contact over the phone, by email, in any format they want to be kept in contact with. But I think the most success we have had is because of those personalised emails as well as personalised phone calls. And while before the pandemic happened, lots of personalised phone calls from people with a learning disability, which really engages people to the cause. So that has been really great. We started specific COVID-related requests, funding requests, at the beginning of the pandemic, and that has brought in just under £1.7 million so far, which again has outdone all of our expectations. and is continuing to increase. And that is a testament to the team, who have just worked really, really hard to do everything that they can to raise money for the organisation and to buck the trend in the other areas that are going to be down, so that we can try and fill those gaps. So it's wholly down to them. Special event income, third party income obviously has been taken off the table for the time being. So we just have to take that hit, but actually the costs of those events can be quite high. So from a net perspective, it's minimal. So from an overall perspective, it hasn't had too much income. Our community engagement face-to-face has obviously been hit like everybody else. However, we have had quite a few successful virtual options that have gone out, which have, for us, brought in decent amounts of money. You know, for a major charity, it wouldn't be huge amounts of money, but for us, it has kept us ticking over, and the community team are therefore delivering as we need them to in terms of income, which has been brilliant. And it's very new for us, virtual options. So the fact that people have responded to that has been really, really positive. Legacies, we're on track at the moment. However, we do anticipate that, like everybody, there could be up to a 20% hit on legacy income. We forecast between £6 and £8 million of legacy income per year. So, and we have a small number of high value legacy donors. So as property prices are impacted, as investment price is impacted, then that will have a big effect on the amount of money that we can raise. So although we're on track at the moment, that just feels even more unknown than it normally does from a legacy perspective. Corporate has been performing really well. So we had the Virgin Money charity partner as part of the London Marathon partnership, and the engagement of staff has been brilliant up until the pandemic. It struggled a little bit, like everybody will have struggled with staff engagement during this time, but the dedication of that organisation and the impact the team had on that partnership before that had been amazing. So actually we're looking really, really strong. And from a new business perspective, our new business lead has brought in substantial amounts of money from an income and gift and kind perspective from a number of different donors. So we've performed really, really well there, which is fantastic.
And that this June was your best ever performance in corporate new business ever.
Oh God, like by a mile, yes.
Which is great.
Which is, it's absolutely brilliant, and a testament to the efforts of that person who has been working really, really hard to buck that trend actually. And I think the COVID messaging has just lent itself really well to us. IG performance has been up in a number of areas. So we have done a number of appeals where we did an insert, for example, the first week of lockdown. So we'd already planned a mailing and we just stuck a coronavirus insert in at the last minute into that, and that performed much higher than we were anticipating. Our TM calls are working particularly well. We've just started that for the first time in a couple of years again, and that's working particularly well. There's some other mailings that we have sent out recently that we're still waiting to see how they'll perform. And because of mail being delayed and the process that we have to go through now to open that, I just need to see how they will land and if we'll start to see a tail off on that a little bit. We've also just started DRTV for the first time in a very, very long time to test that. And every week it sort of varies in terms of how that's performing. So again, it's something that we just need to watch and see how it performs. Digital, we had hired a brilliant digital marketing expert before the pandemic, which is fantastic, and she's been doing great. So it's a new space for us relatively, and we've had lots of just really powerful messages and stories being pushed out from a digital perspective that, from what I can see from other charities, are performing relatively well, which is great, and it's providing a constant stream of income every week, which is really great. And finally, trust and statutory, that is where we're performing really, really strongly as well, particularly from a statutory perspective. So obviously there's been a number of COVID specific funds that have been set up that we've performed really well in. So the team, the trust and statutory team had already hit their annual target in the first couple of months, which is brilliant. And again, all of it's down to the hard work and talent of the team.
Okay, great. And I know, Gary, you have had some similar experiences with your trust team and some great stats on that. So should we go into what you've done during COVID as well, and then we'll come on to the key success factors in each of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. As Ashby said at the start, I joined the charity as the permanent director of fundraising back in January, but my interaction with children first started in March of last year, where I joined them. I was working for Think Consulting Solution as one of their senior consultants, and I was doing interim management as well as consultancy projects. And was asked to assist Children First initially for a 13-week period as their interim director in March, and that got extended and then extended again, and then I joined the team permanently. This is the first time that I've ever worked for a Scotland-only charity, so you might be able to tell from my accent that I am Scottish, from Glasgow, but I've always had UK-wide roles. So this is certainly the longest period of time I've gone without being on a plane as well, because I would spend a lot of time working in England, working predominantly in London actually. So when I joined Children First, what piece of work we were doing was we looked at refocusing and reframing our fundraising strategy. We were aiming to get better balance to our fundraising portfolio, to spread the investment and spread the risk that we were making at the time. Our focus was very much shifting to the value of relationships. I very much subscribe to that mantra. It's easier to retain a donor than it is to replace them, and it's much better I feel, to focus on the people that care about you rather than convincing people that don't care about you to care about you. So that was some of the work we were trying to do, and Children First had been in a slightly opposite trajectory before I joined, about trying to convince members of the public that had never heard of the charity before to care about it. We were looking at building the team and building the team spirit. So COVID came along at a particularly bad point for that, because we had just launched a learning and development program, and there was all sorts of things we were about to do to help the team development and upskill the staff we have even further, because we've got some really talented fundraisers. Really delighted with the team we've got. So there was lots of things going on. Children First, we refer to ourselves as Scotland's national children's charity. So we've got a range of national and local services, all of which aim to help prevent and protect children from abuse and harm, to help make children, families and communities stronger. And I think, like most people, we went into 2021 with the aim to try and grow our income. So Children First's income is normally just shy of £10 million a year, and the fundraising contribution is normally about £3 million of that. So a decent size of the pie, but not the biggest slice of it. We were looking to grow our income this year, so we set ourselves a target of 3.3 million, and at the outbreak of the pandemic, we revisited our financial projections, and like most people, Ashby, if you could click on a sec there, we felt that our trust income would be okay. We'd be able to hold on to that. We entered into the year with a good number of multi-year grants, so we already had commitments in place, but a key piece of work was then about getting the next phase of multi-year grants. And then we see lots of red. We thought major donor income would be down, events that we were planning to do, the Giving Club we were planning to launch, all the cultivation activity we had planned wouldn't be able to go ahead, community for the obvious reasons. We were about to do some work on individual giving acquisition, which we had to put a pin in. We assumed that attrition rates would be steeper. And as Mary touched on with corporate, we also felt that new business would be difficult to solicit, and we had a number of partnerships coming to an end. We felt okay with legacies. Legacies are a decent chunk, a big chunk of our budget, about £800,000 a year. And the year before we had over, I think we just shy £1 million in legacies. So we felt that legacies was a conservative budget and we'd be okay in that front. There's a key piece of work for us to reduce our reliance on legacies going forward as well. And as Mary touched on, we looked across our budget also with some of the activities that couldn't go ahead. There were some natural savings, but then there were some other decisions we made which led to more significant savings, such as pausing some recruitment that we had in the works. So we held on to some of those roles until it was practical to take them out to market. We're just about to move in some of those roles now. And also by not proceeding with our individual giving acquisition, there was quite a chunky saving there. So overall, we estimated, I think it was about £300,000 gross that we felt was at risk, and about 140 net. Now, those aren't the biggest figures in the world, and there's much bigger figures that have been publicised for other charities in terms of the impact. But that, that was significant to us. We had been planning this year for a surplus budget. The charity had a number of years of deficit budgets, and we'd be planning to make a surplus this year. So to then feel have 140k net reduced from that meant there were some decisions that we'd taken that we probably wouldn't have taken beforehand if we'd known that. But thankfully, most of the things that we feared might happen didn't happen, and we find ourselves in a position now that we've just done a first quarter reforecast, and we're predicting a much better position. There's a scenario playing out for us, which touch some wood, buy some lucky white heather, whatever want to cling on to. There's a scenario playing out for us just now where we look like we could be financially better off in terms of our budget. We might far exceed some of those predictions. How we did that, there were a number of COVID funds that most people will be aware of that came available, governments, trust and corporate, and we were able to access the Scottish Government opened up a raft of funds much quicker than the UK government, and we reacted very quickly and received a lot of support from them. Trusts and corporate foundations, we've applied to a lot of those funds there. I think one of the key things for us in that period was about pace, and these were unusual funds, and one of the things I said to the team is that actually if grants are being given out on an ongoing basis, we need to be at the front of the line, because if you're not, there's a fair chance that you could still have a really compelling ask, but there's no funds available. So it was a really unusual process. And there's actually only on one occasion that we were too late to the party, where the money had been distributed out. We changed our tone in a lot of the applications we were doing, so we needed to convey urgency, and that was quite a cathartic process for the team here, because normally there's a lot of jargon that we've been trying to get out of some of our funding applications, so people realise the need for us to communicate in a really plain and simple way, in a way that folk will understand. So that was incredibly helpful, and I think that'll be one of the things that we'll really want to hold on to.
Gary, you had a really good ratio on success rates, didn't you, with your funding applications? I think we talked about the other day, the number you sent out and the number that came back successful.
Yeah, so far we're 32 out of 39. So for 39 decisions we've had back, we've had 32 positive decisions. So my fingers and toes are crossed that that rate continues. Somebody did say to me recently, is that because there was lots of money to be given out and people just needed to give money out? And my response to that is, well, I would like to think it was because our asks were really well positioned and there wasn't just people throwing money out all over the place.
You've got the best trust fundraiser in the whole of the UK, obviously. That's
I think one of the things that helped, one of the things I was going to say is I think one of the reasons that was successful is we were able to early on get a sense from our children and family service teams about the need that they're seeing, or the need that they're envisioning, and what our solutions might be. And we were able to take what was a range of disparate activities, all under the banner of protecting children and families, but present it in a way. We presented our COVID strategy as being in two phases. The first phase was about preventing and protecting children and families from harm, and the second phase would be about repair and recovery. And we used a model which the charity uses in its practice about the cycle of recovery. And I think packaging up our work in that way came across really well and resonated really well with the funders. Folk could see that this was felt like this was a really well thought through, coherent approach, and by supporting us in this first stage, they could see some link throughs to work that would happen later. Another thing we did, Mary referred to some of the appeals. So we launched an urgent appeal. We purposely didn't refer to it as an emergency appeal because we thought we might need that later. So the first appeal we put out was just as lockdown was being announced. We put out an appeal. And you can see one of the graphics that we used there. So the ask was children and families are going to be locked down at home, and many of the families we support don't have access to gardens or technology and devices. So we'd like to be able to provide games and activities to give families activities and things to do. And that resonated really well. We ran that appeal for 5 weeks, and for us, it was our most successful individual giving campaign. Just over £20,000 in cash donations. We spent like £200 on this appeal through Facebook ads. The average gift I just checked out for today was just over was almost £62. 302 donors, 106 of those donors were new to the charity, so really significant for us. But one of the things this really highlighted to me was the size of our donor database, and particularly our cash donors was hollow with I feel that the appeal, the creative, the execution of it could have gone on to raise a lot more if that had been a wee bit deeper. Another thing we're doing, I think one of the team that's responsible for this piece of work is on the call. Claire was looking at our stewardship, so telling stories of the work we were doing. You can see this picture of the little girl. She's holding one of the activity packs that we sent out. You can see the colouring in book and pens there. So the team, particularly our corporate team, were sharing these stories and doing lots of stewardship activities, and sometimes it felt like they were talking into an echo chamber. And I remember Claire getting in touch because there's two of the companies that we'd been engaging with in that way who hadn't responded up to now, that then suddenly responded with, here's, we're going to send you a £10,000 donation. So that was pleasing. So that's sort of like, keep doing the right things in the right way and the results will come. Very much believe. So in context, our COVID emergency fundraising generated about £700,000 for the charity. So just again, to put into context, our planned budget was 3.3 million. So we finished the first quarter something like 118% ahead of our original net budget target. So really pleased with, equally pleased, delighted and relieved for that. So I think that was everything I had in terms of our COVID response to share, Ashby.
Great, no, that's perfect. And in terms of the success factors for you both, then it would be good to, I guess, people to have some stuff to take away from. So what do they need to implement with their teams? What made the difference for you both? I will just ask you both quickly, in terms of the legacy side of things, what did you do with your marketing during COVID? Did you put a complete hold on any proactive legacy marketing, or did you leave it running?
We didn't put a hold on anything. I think we were sensitive around it. And whenever some of it went live, we watched it really closely to see if it was getting any negative feedback. But actually, from our perspective, this is a time when people need support. If you have a child with a learning disability and you're at risk, a lot of the people who have children with a learning disability might be of the older generation and are at higher risk from COVID, then this is the exact time when they need our support. So I think it's really important that we're not afraid to talk about legacy giving and legacy support and the charities that help people during really difficult times, that we're able to survive and continue to be able to deliver that support. So I don't think it's something that people should shy away from, but I have noted that there's been some negative feedback during some of the appeals.
Great. And Gary, what did you do with your legacy?
We actually don't do any legacy marketing. We were planning to do some this year, so we still do plan to do that. But in terms of the rest of our marketing, we certainly weren't hesitant to make the ask. And I know a lot of organisations have been hamstrung by feelings of leadership and trustees that this isn't the time to ask. I feel that's a fundamental mistake, and then I feel for the fundraisers that are operating in those environments.
Yeah.
And ours is a tiny budget as well, just to put it into perspective. We didn't have adverts everywhere. It was a very small budget.
Fine. I know one of the charities I've spoken to, their legacy team managed to get under the radar of their brand and leadership team and managed to continue to keep some legacy ads running, and they had a really good response, and everyone was like, where are all these inquiries coming from? It's like, I don't know. So key success factors. Let's start with you, Mary. So talk us through the kind of briefly the kind of things that you felt helped your team.
Well, starting with the team, really, I don't think any charity can be successful without a really talented fundraising team, and it doesn't matter what challenge you're faced with. If you don't have determined members of staff who are very talented, then you're going to struggle. And I just think, and I'm not just saying this, you know me, Ashby, I don't say stuff if I don't believe it. We have some brilliant fundraisers and really, really committed colleagues who really want to make a difference for MenCap. And if we are pushed into a really difficult situation, that is when they will fly. So they have just been amazing with their work ethic. Agile working across the teams as well. So we've had a couple of vacancies across the team, but actually we identified that trust and statutory was a really key area for us. And there was a couple of vacancies on that team, whilst corporate have a little bit of more time because their corporate partnerships weren't as demanding. So utilising the skills of people who can work across different teams is really important. And what you need is really willing teams who are collaborative and who want to help and who understand that this will only benefit them in the long run. And I'm really lucky that my team think that way. So everyone has been doing whatever they can across different teams whenever there has been a need to make sure that we have capacity where we need it. I think we've been particularly lucky, you know, and I see a typo in this slide, so apologies, that we have frontline workers on the ground directly supporting people like NHS workers. And although we don't have to fundraise for that element of our work, the people that support MenCap know that we do that and they want to hear about that. And so we've been able to push that message in, and don't be afraid to push message in about what you do, even if you don't fundraise for it, as long as you're not implying in any way that money will go towards it. PPE, we do need money for. We know we're not going to get money back for all of the PPE that we've had to buy, and that has been a chronic amount of money. So that messaging, especially in corporate, has worked particularly well. So effective messaging, I think our digital marketing manager is brilliant. You know, our ID team, everyone has been able to look at the situation we're in, identify stories that they're hearing across the organisation and using that messaging to push out to our supporters so that they feel positive about what we're doing. You know, we don't pull on heartstrings at MenCap. We talk about the positive impact that we're having and the needs for support and all of these amazing things people with a learning disability can achieve, and that we want to continue doing that work. And so the team have come up with some really lovely messaging throughout the last few months, utilising all of our channels. So I don't think any organisation should just say, right, trust and statutory is going to be the only area of success here. Try across all of your fundraising teams and see what you can do around COVID messaging, what you can do to lift performance in all of the different teams during this period. And you need to think differently across every single team during this time. Focus on what we're good at though, and not just follow others just because, you know, I was approached a few weeks ago about the virtual event that someone is doing and it sounds amazing and they wanted us to get involved. But actually when you sit down and go through it and see if you can contribute fully to that event, it might not be right for you right now. You know, we've rinsed our channels a little bit recently. So, and we know that we will have more messaging that needs to go out. So think about things effectively. If you struggle to put on a gala dinner in normal times, then you're going to struggle to put on a gala dinner virtually. So don't think that you can do all things at all times just because of coronavirus, and don't think you have to follow the trend just because other people are doing it. And then have confidence in your experience and expertise when being questioned. I think particularly for leaders in any charity, you know, there was a lot of questioning at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, how much money are we going to bring in? You know, how badly is this going to be affected? What are your teams doing in order to make sure that it's impacted as smallly as possible? And you have to be strong in your beliefs and confident in your understanding of fundraising and your areas of expertise. And I think it's really important that you're able to stand strong with that, you know, and not pushing back or being difficult, but just saying, actually, here's what we're doing. We do this all of the time. We have our pipelines. This will continue to work. This is how it works all of the time, and it will continue to work during COVID. Have faith in what we're doing, and we'll update you as we go along. So I think those are some of the things that have worked best.
Definitely during this, from the conversations that I've been having with leaders, I think it's become quite apparent the level of, I guess, sway and respect that sometimes fundraising is given across charities, you know, and particularly at trustee level, the lack of understanding of perhaps you know, fundraising and the importance of it. And I think, you know, even in the hiring practices of hiring fundraising directors, it's very different from when you hire a finance director and you might have an external finance director on the panel. I think it's demonstrated how challenging it is for fundraising leaders to push upwards and try and influence the trustees to keep investing in times like this.
And to be fair to our trustees, they've been super supportive during this time and been so excited and genuinely energized by the success of what the team have been achieving. It's been, I think it's really showing them what fundraising can do actually in MenCap, and I think that's been brilliant. So it's really helped to galvanize everybody in a strange way. So I think that's great.
Great. And Gary, in terms of your key success factors then, so just talk us through what you've found has been really helpful and what people can do.
Yeah, so a couple of these points I've already referred to. So the presentation of the need and the solution, so the urgent language that I referred to earlier on, demonstrating the direct impact of our work. So for example, the activity fund, the urgent appeal was based around, I think people could imagine a family receiving a delivery of board games and what impact that might have, where sometimes previously the way we communicate our work was a wee bit more difficult to imagine what that might look and feel like. So I think that's a key factor for us about being able to helping people imagine what it might be like, or to put yourself in the beneficiary's shoes, for lack of a better phrase. I mentioned the presentation of the COVID strategy was well received. So I think that's some key things I'd pull out from that. The pace and the unusual nature of some of the decisions that we're making. In normal times, you would have a date that your applications had to be in. You would have a date when they would be reviewed, and then a date you get your decision. Well, that rule book was well and truly out of the window. And I think one of the things that helped us, Ashby, was help us respond at pace, was identifying really earlier on what is their organisational response going to be. And once we got sort of like the case for support written up for those areas, we were very, that process of then producing other applications became quite quick and quite straightforward for us. So we were able to turn around applications quickly because we were clear on what our asks were going to be, what our priorities were.
And Gary, I know when we talked, you said your organisation works really well together, so there's not a siloed approach. I'll put you on the spot a little bit, and then I'll ask Mary after as well. In terms of those that are joining us today whose organisations are a bit siloed or teams work separately, what advice would you give them to try and heal those gaps now?
I think we probably have had aspects of the siloed approach. But certainly success and showing how the fundraising impacts. So the conversation we had with the teams around about, well, what would you like to be able to do to support children and families during this pandemic if you had the funds to do it? Helped. So we got these items out, what folk were hoping to do, and then when we were able to go and raise funds round about them, that helped enormously. And then once you get credit in the bank, it's a lot easier to go forward. But if I had my time again, Ashby, it's that sort of conversation that I'd be wanting to have. Well, what would you like to be able to do? What could and should we be doing to help families if we had the funds to do so? And as I mentioned earlier on, a lot of our work is statutory funded, so there's limitations in what one can do with those grants. And our voluntary income gives us the freedom and flexibility to do the things that we really want to be able to do to drive our strategies forward.
Okay, and Mary, in terms of your advice for people that are working in siloed organisations, how do they bring people together?
I think talking about the bigger picture, we always have to bring it back to what we're all there for. We're all there to support whoever it is that your charity supports. And if you focus on the overarching message of what you're trying to achieve and show everybody how they can contribute towards that, then I think that's a really good starting point. Talking about success, people want to be part of successful stories. And if you can talk about what you have achieved during this time, what has worked really well, and that you want to do more of that, then anybody who is anyway motivated will want to be part of that as well. It's an expectation, actually. I don't think we should be afraid to say to people that collaboration is expected. This is how we operate as an organisation, and it's not down to individuals to decide whether to do that. We have to get through this together, and we have to work together, or we're not going to be able to achieve that. And we can achieve so much more together than we can separately. And then also talking about transferable skills, I think particularly in MenCap, where many of our teams have supported other areas of fundraising, you know, talking about what skills they have that can lend themselves to other areas of fundraising and how that can benefit them in their CV in the future. You know, if you can talk about having supported lots of other areas of fundraising, then that's only going to benefit you and your CV as well as the charity in the future.
Great. No, perfect. And guys, if you've got any other questions, we'll come to them at the end, but if you want to ask them as we go through, if there's any that are pressing, we'll tap into them straight away. Sorry, Gary, and I interrupt you for your last point. So in terms of the introduction side, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, we, before this started, our major gift fundraiser had been meeting with our board of trustees to identify links and contacts that people might be able to make introductions to, and there were a couple of people we met during that process that told us they didn't know anybody, and during this process, it was one of those people has been one of our top fundraisers. We've had introductions to new corporate partners with a charity. You know, we've been adopted by some companies on the back of this. We've been introduced to a charitable trust that the person was related to one of the trustees of. So we suddenly, you know, had somebody that said they didn't have an address book that could help us. Turns out they actually have amazing contacts. And I've been speaking to the board about actually that's the type of work, that's the type of introductions we need. In terms of corporate partners, a lot of our corporate partners previously here have been more sort of transactional or philanthropic, people, you know, giving us money. And we want more strategic transformational partnerships where we're going to get those through introductions. You know, I'm not a great fan of the Charity of the Year beauty parade entering into the staff votes, because your chances of winning, you know, for a cause that's maybe not the greatest known, is going to be limited. I remember one occasion when I worked for Muscular Dystrophy UK, we got on a voting paper and then found out we were up against WizKids, Cancer Research UK and the British Heart Foundation.
You didn't win that one. I'm getting
we came third, which was a victory, but there was a lot of effort put into that and led to nothing in the end. So the value of introduction, so that was helpful, and I'm hoping that's going to be one of the learning points that, you know, other people take from this in terms of the board, realise that actually you do know people, and you do know people that would be happy and willing to help if asked.
Yeah. No, it is just everyone pulling together, isn't it? And we'll move on to the next slide. So this will be the thing that everyone wants to hear, is all the mistakes and anything juicy. No, obviously lessons learned. You know, what would you do slightly differently? So Gary, let's just start with you on this one, and then we'll come on to Mary. So in terms of what you've learned through this process, or any errors you think, oh, if I could do it again, I wouldn't do that. Just talk us through your 3 points.
Yeah. So there were 3 things I put out here, Ashby, and I think they answer some of the questions that have come up in the chat a little bit. One was about leading the conversation. So the furlough scheme was announced on a Friday, I think. So on the Monday, I initiated a conversation internally about how we were going to utilise this. So I feel that we started to influence that conversation before my fellow directors had started to think about it. I was coming to the executive team with a proposal about what we were going to do in fundraising, and we moved a lot quicker on that than the rest of the organisation did. So I think that helped influence the conversation and avoided some of the scenarios that I'm hearing other people find themselves in, where there's an arbitrary figure that you've got to achieve. So you've got to furlough X% of your fundraising team. Mm-hmm. At that point, we had already studied where we thought there was opportunity and where there was going to be a decrease in activity, and our proposal reflected that. So that was the one thing I would take out of it. Second thing was the need to stimulate activity, and that's going to be crucial as we go forward. If you look at the 2.6 challenge, and that was very successful for us. It proved that community fundraising can happen to an extent. So we need a willingness to try, we need to be creative, we need to be willing to put some things out there. Some of them will work, some of them won't work, and to have that sort of environment where you're able to try things. But one thing's definite, if you don't try anything, nothing will work. So that's one of the other things I would say, we've got to be willing to, need to do some things to stimulate some activity, because otherwise nothing will happen, and other people, other charities will do things, and they'll get support that might come your way otherwise.
We've definitely seen that, and generally across the sector, our conversations with our clients that didn't furlough all of their community fundraising team, or furloughed a couple rather than 90%, are the ones that have done better. Their income's up, because you have to have people having conversations and talking to supporters, otherwise they're not going to get anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The final thing I'd pull out, Ashby, was that giving to us isn't easy enough. So slightly more than this, but it wasn't far off. It's kind of like 1 out of every 10 visits to our donation page led to a gift. Now, if we can move the dial there, when I worked for Think Consulting Solutions, we did a digital benchmarking survey and it was about 14%. So it was pretty poor across. I think part of the reason for that is most charities offer you 2 payment options. You can pay with a card, credit or debit card, or PayPal on most sites. May just be me, may just be proper sort of first world problems, but I find, getting my credit card out and having to type in the number to be a real pain. And if more and more people are engaging with us via mobile and tablet, and getting used to paying for all sorts of things with their thumbprint, but yet it becomes a charity, they've got to give us their inside leg measurements. It's, we're trying to make people fill in forms when people don't want to fill out anything. So giving's not easy enough, and that's something that we need to change, and I'm determined to do so.
Yeah, it's a real big digital piece, isn't it? Around so many charities that it's just not simple enough to donate on their website. I think a lot of people are thinking that now, and we're seeing more digital roles come to market around that. But yeah, I mean, especially in the first few weeks, I think there were a lot of people that were like, oh gosh, we need to really get behind our charity sector, and then finding the card, finding the details is a bit of a frustration. Mary, so what would you have done differently doing it all again? Hopefully we won't have to do it all again, but
yeah, let's hope we never face this ever again. I think, well, to be fair, there's learning for everything going forward, so I think we can take a positive out of it, definitely. But nothing's ever fast enough for me anyway. But I think organizational response at the beginning was challenging. We're not an emergency response organization. Our fundraisers immediately want to be out, and I wanted them to be out asking for money, but actually it took us a little bit of time to understand what has changed for people with a learning disability. What additional support do they need now? How are we going to change our delivery programs that we fundraise for to be able to support them effectively during this time? And actually, so that will always be evolving, and it's changing week to week even now, and so you have to allow time for that. But in hindsight, I think we could have been a little bit quicker at the beginning to just get some emergency sort of messaging out there. And I'm talking about maybe a week quicker. It's not massive, but actually every day was critical. I also think in hindsight, whilst trying to balance the need across teams, some areas have been, you can never be too focused in any area, and I think you need to balance everything, but they've been so focused on the COVID emergency response asks that some of the business as usual has dropped off. And we have to be able to balance all of that, and we can move resources around as we need to support each other whenever there is a bit of latency in other areas. So that is a major focus for me right now. I think we're still not getting that quite right, and you want to respond to all of these opportunities, and we have to respond to all of them, but we can't let the business as usual and the long-term income suffer as a result of that, because a lot of this COVID income is 1 year. It's not multi-year. And then I think self-care, for everybody, whenever we were sent home to work all those many months ago, you were trying to do everything the same, but except it was on Zoom, and nobody can perform effectively if you're not taking care of yourself. And I think it took me probably longer than it should have done, and I'm sure other people felt that way, to understand how I needed to balance that effectively and what I needed to do from a diary perspective to get that right, so that I could continue to perform to the best of my ability. And I think we're continuously facing different emotional barriers and energy barriers during this, and everyone will hit those at different times. And I just think everybody needs to be more aware of that going forward, because from what we can see, this isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think it's the mental impact, isn't it? You can't, for difficult conversations you're having, you can't then just leave. Your home is your office. You can go into your kitchen, but all the mental negativity that's around you whilst you're either like working with one of your team or receiving bad feedback or whatever, you can't, it's so much harder to get away from it. So as leaders, I guess it's being more sensitive than ever around that. And then moving forward, and I'm just mindful of time, guys, so if we can just whiz through these pretty quickly so that we've got some time for questions. So Mary, just in terms of tips, what do people need to be focusing on?
So as I just touched on, the needs of those we support in particular will evolve, and it's always lovely to have out of the box cases for support sitting ready that we just utilize and send off applications, but actually that's not going to be the way it is anymore, you know, for some time, because the needs of the people we support will continuously adapt during this time. So I think everyone just needs to be aware of that, and we just need to work a little bit differently. Planning for the unknown, I think I can't even count the number of financial scenarios I've done now, but you continuously, every week it feels different about where we're going to land, and I think you just need to be continuously looking at your numbers. No matter what level you are in the organisation, numbers are our key focus, and so everyone needs to be on top of those and continuously looking at those going forward. Looking at supporter trends and responding quickly. So, you know, if you see something works that you think can work for your organisation, then do it. Get out and do it quickly. And I think at times we can be too slow at doing certain things, and the charity sector as a whole. And I think we just need to be a little bit more agile and fast in our approach. Driving performance and motivating teams remotely. So I think we need to focus on that. You know, I'm not sure from a MenCap perspective when we'll be back in the office, but I know it'll be very different going forward. And I'm sure that's the case for everybody. And it's a different way of working. It confuses me every day, and I'm sure it confuses every manager. You know, how do you get yourself motivated, but also your team, and how do you keep pushing them through these difficult times? And so we just need to keep focused on that continuously and learn from other organizations as well about what they're doing. Yeah. And then be prepared that some things will fail. We're trying everything so differently at the moment that not everything is going to be success. And so there has to be some risk appetite within the organization and the directorate.
Great. Okay. And Gary, you're kind of, what are you focusing on moving forward?
Yeah, I think the initial COVID funds that opened up, they opened up and we had to react to them. Nobody knew it was coming. But what we do know now is that there are funds for the next stage starting to open up. So get prepared for them. They may not be open. There's not many of them open now. One from Children in Need, two from Children in Need, one from Comic Relief that I can think off the top of my head. But they are coming, so start to think through, get your case for supports together and be ready to move on them. We are looking at office space, so we've got like a lot of organisations, lots of properties. We've done a big investment. Thank goodness we did this investment in our IT infrastructure beforehand, before this pandemic broke out. I've said to my fundraising team before, I see too many of them in our office. Clearly it's not appropriate for people to go be out seeing donors, but I echo a point that Mary made earlier on, when it's safe to do so. I want people to be out seeing supporters and donors. Great fundraisers are rarely sat at their desks, and I've seen people too much. So we're looking at, we've been able to operate very efficiently and effectively during this period. We don't need huge, great big properties. Not everybody needs a desk everywhere, so we're going to move to a much more agile culture. We will reduce our office spaces and the associated costs with that. And one of the interesting things during this period is that sort of the organisational conversation that's going on just now about the difference between flexibility and agile working. And people think flexible working here meant that you had a slightly different working pattern. So you maybe work 8 to 4 rather than 9 to 5. Well, that's not really flexible working. That's flexible working to suit a need. Actually, be much better to focus more on, everybody be able to focus much more on outputs rather than inputs. And if folk are able to get the work done a lot quicker than, you know, in less than 35 hours, well, I don't mind that scenario. I'll be quite open to that. I've mentioned, you know, there's not going to be any challenge events this year. I feel enormously for MenCap with the London Marathon.
We're still holding out hope. We are still holding out hope.
Fingers and toes across for you, but in my mind, I've written them off
for
this year, Mary. So we're looking at some stuff we can do to stimulate that activity and get ready for our launch in our 2021 programme when we, in the not too distant future as well. And then just making some decisions around about safeguarding our donors, including our high value donors, to make sure we're you know, we're not tapping people out, we're not going with too many asks, because every email we send out leads to some unsubscribes. We need the right asks to go to the right major donors. So just you know, there's an initiative we've got going on just now, a homemade Olympic challenge that we're doing just now. We've not sent out any emails to any of the segments of the database for that on a purpose decision. Probably could do with it, but those segments have had a number of asks just now, and we just need to think of the longer term here.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And making sure we've got, you know, donor journey. So I mentioned the urgent appeal. You know, I won't lie to you and say we had a beautifully designed donor journey in place for that, but we brought in people, you know, 300 donors in the back of that, and we've had to on the fly come up with journeys. So yeah, there's lots of things like that we just had to react to, but we need to now get the back end in place.
Yeah, okay. And then useful tips. So literally we will have to blitz through this in about 1 minute each. So go, Mary, let's go.
Okay, opportunity in everything. And I truly believe that no matter how difficult things are, there is always opportunity, and every single fundraiser needs to be focused on their own area, their own team, and what they can achieve during this time. Find a way to regain focus on even when things are tough and you're struggling with coronavirus. You know, I think we all have an accountability to find a way through this ourselves. And if you're really struggling, talk to people. You know, there is help out there to support people, but we need to find a way of getting us through this. These are more tips for individuals. I think at the moment, a lot of fundraisers are going through a really difficult time. You know, there's lots of cuts going on in organizations. And then there's also people who are in jobs who might have had ambitions for the coming months or years to move, which might have been nipped in the bud. I think it's really important to appreciate what you have right now. You know, if you have a job, we're really lucky. If you have been made redundant, there is opportunity. So, you know, there's lots of jobs available. We have jobs available at the moment. Ashby is working on them. So if anyone is looking for work, do let us know. But appreciate what you have if you do have a job. And it might be that you need to reevaluate your immediate or short-term career goals. But think about what you're going to do so you have impact on your CV and on the charity that you're working for at the moment, so that you can push yourself forward when things do improve, either internally in your organization or externally. I think the great stand out even more during these times. Don't be one of these people that sits there and thinks things are tough. We can all just sort of float under the radar a little bit. Nobody really expects anything. We do. We expect a lot, and we all have to do everything we physically can to get through this. And the people who are brilliant become more brilliant. So be one of those brilliant people. And collaboration is key. I just think it's expected, and we have to push it forward throughout the organisation.
Yeah, we will also in the next month we'll release some details of some training that we're going to do around your career development during times like this, because it is a very different landscape, and we all have to adapt our goals. And then Gary, let's see whether we can get through these lovely and quickly as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned the first one. Make sure the case is really simple and clear. You're not the target audience. Get rid of all that jargon. Make it really simple to understand. I talked about formal and informal touch points, and there was a question in the chat about how we keep people engaged. So I've you know, for the team, we have a mix of formal and informal touch points. So throughout this period, our CEO has been sent what was daily emails. It's now changed to weekly now. We did a virtual roadshow with the executive team where we met all of our different teams through this period. And fundraising, we have a weekly all-team Zoom call. We call it the Fundraising Natter, where I give updates and answer kind of questions. They have various agenda items that team members put on that. I think if there's one thing I could do differently, I would look more about how we're going to bring our furlough staff back. If the part-time option was available from the start of the furlough scheme, I would utilize that every day, because I underestimated the return to work for people, and there was only actually really one member of staff we had come back from furlough that came back like all guns blazing. Everybody else has needed a wee bit of support to get into the role, and we underestimated that. And I've mentioned the willingness to try things also, and I've referred to just briefly in the last section that, you know, we do need to start thinking about the medium and longer term, get away from thinking of the near term just now. So we're about to start a piece of work looking at our 18-month operating plan. So 3 6-month windows, and getting the work streams and reprioritising things, getting things back up and running that we stopped. And getting the front foot is my advice to any heads or directors out there. Don't wait for other people to initiate the conversations. So we've already made a decision as we've looked at our staffing resource and structure, what we need, and made a decision to delete one of the roles through this process. You know, not waiting for people to start that and raise that conversation with you would be one of my tips. Do it yourself.
Great, okay. And guys, we have run out of time. I know some of you have put some questions in there. If there's anyone that you want really followed up on, just drop me an email after this, and then what I will do following this is just share the slides around so you've got them to take away, also the chat just in case there's some points in there. Thank you, Mary and Gary, for joining us today, or joining me today. If you've enjoyed today, please do post about it on LinkedIn, that's great. I will CC Mary and Gary into the email wrap up that I do after this, so if you want to reach out directly you can do, but please remember they are leading teams, so you know, if they get loads of emails they're going to take a little while to come back to you. And then as I said, this is one of our webinar series. Our next webinar is on the 13th of August and is part of our D&I sub webinar series, I guess, around gender equality within the fundraising sector, so that should be another really interesting one for people to attend to. But thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Today. Thanks again to Mary and Gary, and I hope you all have a lovely week.
Thanks, Ashby. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.